Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe.
And I am Mark Stay. And a huge thank you, as always, to our wonderful bestseller academics and patrons on Patreon for supporting this podcast. Without your ongoing support, we simply could not keep the podcast going. So if you want to support the podcast yourself, go to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. You can find all sorts of fun stuff there. If you want to check out the Academy, go to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. All sorts of amazing stuff over there. It's all go. Mr. D, how are you this week?
I'm doing great. And I'm very excited because this week's London Book Fair, isn't it? In time of recording. And you're off on a little train journey tomorrow.
I am. I should be up at the crack of dawn to get to the London Book Fair. I'm moderating a panel called How I Write, and it features two guests of the podcast. So Millie Johnson, who was in our RNA Awards winners podcast, and she's amazing, incredible best-selling author. Tim Sullivan, who's actually going to be on next week's podcast. So he's a guest to be, and Stacey Halls, who I will definitely be trying to get on the podcast because she's an amazing author, and they're going to be talking about writing routines, how they write. So I'm taking bets now for how many times I can mention the 200 word a day challenge in 45 minutes.
At least 45 times, surely.
Exactly. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if that comes up. I mean, in terms of like, do people have do they have their own challenges? Do they do in the 200 word challenge? But it's kind of interesting as well, isn't it, to reference a lot of the feedback we've got from people as to how things like this really, really help. So that's going to be very exciting. And are you gonna get a bit of time to kind of mosey around and check out what's going on there?
A bit. I'm going to be meeting with my agent. We'll have a little chinwag about all good stuff in the future. So I will have a mosey around. Say hello. I'll hopefully see friends in bookselling and publishing that I haven't seen for 2.5 years.
Right? Yeah. And so for people who've never been to a book fair, because I think book fairs are kind of like, from the outside they feel like this kind of mystique place where all of the industry meet and no one else is allowed in and no one really knows what goes on in all the discussions. What, from your perspective, people who've never been to, say, something like the London Book Fair, which is probably the biggest, if not one of the biggest book fairs in the world. I mean, Frankfurt's big.
I think Frankfurt might be bigger, but it is huge.
It's up there. It's a grand slam
interesting.
event,
I've been seeing stuff on Twitter the last couple of days. People going, "Oh, should I go? I'm an author. Should I go?" And it did used to be industry only, but they now have the author HQ thing, which is where I'm doing my thing, which has a full event schedule for the whole of the London Book Fair, full of great stuff, with great authors coming in and talking about why, they're writing and self-publishing and traditional publishing. And there's also all kinds of suppliers for authors. There are people who do marketing, who do book covers, who can do, tote bags for you and T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. So actually there's a ton of stuff for authors out there, and it's definitely worth checking out. I mean, publishers and agents tend not to encourage their authors to go, I think, because I think they're worried you're going to doorstep them and go, "Oi, that 99p promotion 18 months ago."
Right when they're in the middle of trying to sell your foreign rights to the next big deal for the rest of the year. And that's the thing as well. I mean, the book fair, there's a lot of networking that goes on by, with agents, with publishers. A lot of deals get done, don't they? But I think it's kind of interesting for an indie author. I mean, it's interesting just to kind of experience it and just see a bit more about how the industry works, because I think as an author we're often on the outside of the industry. There's this kind of line where everything happens beyond that line, and everyone else just writes the books and does their edits. But I think it's always important, whatever industry you're in, you should understand the inner workings of it, because it helps you. And that's, I think, why you've had this great advantage in your career, and that in fact you've worked in publishing for many years. You kind of understand how the machinery works. It's a bit like driving a car. If you can kind of if you know where the engine is, it can help. When things you get stuck on stuff. So interesting. Yeah,
little things like last week we were talking about how to get your book into Waterstones and get in touch with gardeners. People like gardeners will be there. They will have people on hand who can point you in the right direction. So yeah, definitely worth going.
I think as well, one of the major things that people don't realize as well, that that importance of actually having said hello to someone, looked them in the eye, maybe swapped, business cards or whatever people do nowadays, to have that personal contact. I found, I went to a lot of music conferences in my early kind of music day career, and the amount of people I met who I then created relationships with for many, many years and ended up having some great deals, down the road, whether it was, getting music on certain TV shows, that's where a lot of the people I met were. So I do think it's a worthwhile kind of a recce, and it's a day out. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a day out in London?
Exactly.
Absolutely brilliant. It's kind of like a novelty these days, isn't it? You get to ride on the big red bus.
It really is, yeah.
Fantastic stuff. Excellent. And what else is new in your week this week, Mark?
Well, the proof pages for Ghost of Ivy Barn, the third Witches of Woodville book, they arrived this week. So some authors get them as actual printed pages, but I get them as a PDF on screen. And I've mentioned this before in previous episodes, but I read them out loud because for me, it's the only way to spot homonyms, errors and spelling errors and typos and sentences that just might not scan very well. So I do it at this computer. This is the bigger screen, and I stand up with a glass of water and my little magic mouse in my hand. Yeah. Well, if I sit down, you tend to slump, and then after a while you start nodding off.
Well, it's
not a thrilling book, but it's just exactly.
Yeah, but you've read it so many times already, right?
Yeah. And you kind of have to read it in a kind of monotone, because if you start accentuating stuff, that's when you skip over words and you miss stuff.
Interesting. I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought you'd have gone all kind of like thespian on us.
Yeah, I know some people like to use their computer to read it back to them, but with this way, and also you're looking at the page layout and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm 100 pages in, and I've found 7 or 8 little errors that I need changing. So it's pretty always good. Where you always find stuff, and this has been through editor. Well, I always send stuff off to my editor that's been through 2 beta readers and pro writing aid, and then of course you make all sorts of changes and all sorts of extra mistakes. So it's been through an editor, copy editor, proofreader, and still there are mistakes. So you can't catch everything, but you catch as much of it as you possibly can. And I use because marking up PDFs is a nightmare. So I use a web-based application called Kami, Kami, which was developed for teachers in schools to mark up work, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's the best PDF marker upper that I've ever come across, and it does a little report. It can run a little report rather than do 400 pages of a novel. It will do a summary of where all the changes are. So you just give that to your editor, and they go straight to it. So it's really cool.
I'll have to check that out. I have to check that out, because they're gold dust, those type of applications, because I've been using PDF editors for ages, and some of them are clunky as hell.
Really, this one's good. The best one I know. So I'll put a link in the show notes, folks. You can check it out because it's free as well.
Yeah, well, fantastic. And Kami, you're very welcome for the plug. It's like great, and I think it's all about that. I am totally one for, like, if somebody's created something brilliant, then they deserve all the customers and referrals they get. I think it's brilliant. They support good software, folks. Absolutely. That's really exciting. There's one thing that caught my eye this week, Mark, which was friend of the podcast, Shannon Mayer. Now, if anyone who's been a long time with us, or all of you long time,
we love Shannon.
We love Shannon. She was we had her on the show, I think, twice in the first 30 episodes, but we've had her on 3 times. Absolutely inspired. If you've never heard the interviews of Shannon Mayer and you want to get inspired, and you're an indie author and you want to know what's actually possible, you must go listen to these interviews. Brilliant. Just go to our website, bestsellerexperiment.com, click on podcasts, or just simply click in right in the search button, Shannon Mayer. And they'll all come up. It's a pretty good little search engine.
I'll stick links in the show notes.
Links as well for people. Absolutely. Yeah. And Shannon's always been kind of pushing the envelope on what's possible. I mean, firstly, the thing we discovered about her was just her phenomenal way of being able to write a book in a month. And when we interviewed her back in 2017, when we first interviewed her, she was up to about 30 books, of which 12 she'd written in that previous year to when we interviewed her, which we fell off our chair. In fact, she's in the trailer for episode 0, where we're like, it's quite a good one. But since then, since we spoke to her about her number of books. She's up to 60 books now, Mark. 60 books.
So what? She slowed down then.
She's yeah, but Mark, she's way younger than us. Way younger than us. She's got a lot of road ahead of her. Yeah. But this is the cool thing. This week she has launched a Kickstarter campaign. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with Kickstarter, we've talked a lot about Kickstarters. We've talked about well, obviously, Patreon is a kind of a version of that in some ways. We've talked about how you can, crowdfund a book, but anyone who's been reading any of the news lately about Mr. Brandon Sanderson, he broke all records recently by having a Kickstarter, which raised, was it $50 million, Mark?
Well, I think if you go and look now, it might be up to 55. It's going up like when you put petrol in your car and it goes ding 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 ding. It's going up like that.
It's like that now at the moment, isn't it? Petrol in the car. But going back. Brandon did one previously, I think a couple of years ago, and he broke records then, but it was only a mere 6 or 7 million at that time, right?
6 million, yes.
So it just shows you so I think it's very inspiring for people when everyone's saying, well, and we had that big debate about selling a book for 99p. Well, this is the reverse.
Yeah.
This is the reverse where people are saying, yeah, I'll pay $500 for a limited edition hardback with beautiful maps. Absolutely, I'll support your career. So I want people to go and explore this, because as indie authors out there are other ways to generate income. And Shannon has done this really fascinating Kickstarter whereby she's got a new series that she's been writing over the last little while. And she's basically creating kind of limited, stunning hardcover books, which are individually signed, and they're just this really high quality. But she's also thrown in, this is a really great thing, within this series that she's got, there's it's called the 40 Proof series. It's been a massive bestseller on Amazon, but she's got these tarot cards which she's had designed by an artist, and these tarot cards are kind of integrated into the series, so they're kind of a relevant object, but she's now making them available to people. Anyway, she launched this 6 days ago. She was going for a goal of 75,000 Canadian, which is, what's that, 50,000, 60,000 US. In 5 days, she's already doubled her target. She's up to $140,000. This is an indie author, folks. This isn't Mr. Sanderson who's got the team behind him and an incredible group. This is an indie author, cottage industry. And it's going to go a lot higher. So we'll check in on how the total's going. But for me, this is really inspiring, because for many people, that's kind of a life-changing amount of money. And she's done it, pretty much single-handedly by building a list, from day one with her books. Yes. But because she's got the list now, she's able to reach out to all these people and say, hey, I'm doing this really cool, offer, and boom, that's actually only with 544 backers so far. So it really ramps. It really ramps. So firstly, congratulations to Shannon. Secondly, if you love Shannon's stuff, go check out her Kickstarter. But thirdly, what could you do, folks? What could you do in this? Think big. Like you might just be writing your first book, but if you think about where this might come in your kind of trajectory in the future, it might be 5 years from now. But if you're thinking about it now and you're planning for it, and you maybe, write something in the book that could be a Kickstarter type object that could be then sold on top of just the book itself, something which has real meaning and value. For us, Mark, it would probably be back to reality. We'd have to sell pendants or prisms, 2 halves of prisms, something like that. I don't
know. Little toy double-decker buses.
Double-decker buses.
Yeah.
Mini Glastonbury stages. Cows, obviously.
Yes.
It has to be cows. Like farmyard animals.
Cuddly cows. Cuddly cows. Yes.
Squishamillo cows for your children. There you go. So there's all kinds of things that we've missed the boat on, Mark. But what would you do? Okay, what would be the kind of classic object that you would do for your Woodville series? What would you say would be kind of like the central theme?
Oh, That's probably some sort of notebook, because it all, the first book certainly revolves around a book found that Faye finds that belonged to her mother, and you could probably do a really nice notebook that's a facsimile of it.
Nice.
And maybe have some nice end papers, with some of the illustrations that her mother did. But you could use it as a notebook yourself.
And you do love a good notebook, don't you, Mr. Stay?
Oh, I do. Yes,
I saw you on was it on Facebook just the other day? You were very excited about your new notebook for your new project.
Well, this is the one I'm using for Woodville 4. Right. Which I went a bit over the top in foils in London.
It's very for people that are listening to this on audio. Let me describe it to you. It looks like very expensive Christmas wrapping paper on the outside. It's very shiny and gold. Yes. But you know what? I think there's something to be said. Oh, has it got a little clasp as well? It's got like a metal. Oh, it's got a posh metal clasp. Little clasps, well,
and it's by a company called Permalinks, and it says our cover is a faithful reproduction of Style de Neo-Renaissance design, popular in 19th century Germany. It's like an old bookbinding kind of thing, but it's gorgeous. And
I know that company.
It makes me feel.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. I was just about to say that, Mark. This is really important. Okay, folks, if you're going to buy a notebook, you can pop onto Amazon Basics and get one for probably $2 or £2 a pop or whatever. But I think buying good shoes, buying a good mattress, two things you should always invest in, right? Good shoes, good mattress, and good notebooks, because you work with a notebook for a period of time. Like it's going to be weeks, maybe months. And there's something about holding a good, like a high quality notebook. It kind of ups your game as a writer, doesn't it, Mark? Would you agree? Like when you open a beautiful book, it's like, oh, I'm a proper author. I'm writing a proper notebook, and it does shift something psychologically.
Maybe it might. I think it needs to be the right notebook for the right project. I mean, I think, you might find it a bit intimidating in that, every word needs to be perfect. Nah, just get it down there, scribble, highlight, whatever. I mean, this is the Philosophy of Time Travel by Roberta Sparrow. Now, if you're a Donnie Darko fan, you'll know this is a book featured in the film. And this is for a script I'm writing that taps on time travel a little bit, so it's the right notebook for the right. This was given to me as a Christmas present from a friend. It's the right notebook for the right project. The only ones I can't use are spiral bound ones because I'm left-handed and cack-handed. So it's really, really difficult.
And I love spiral bounds because they're so much easier to write. Because if you get a notebook that doesn't lay flat. I mean, what were we talking? There's actually a reference to love of stationery actually in today's interview, Mark, which we should dive into because it's absolutely brilliant. So without further ado, Mark, tell us about our lovely guest today, FMA Dixon.
Yes, FMA. Now, the M in FMA stands for Malcolm, and I think for reasons of brevity, we'll refer to him as Malcolm. But FMA Dixon, he works at the University of Kent in Canterbury, just up the road from me, and a few weeks ago, we appeared together at the Faversham Literary Festival. Havisham. Remember, we all pronounce it like that now. And it was so much fun, and he's such a lovely guy. I thought we should get him on the podcast. Now, Malcolm's first novel, The Little House on Everywhere Street, which, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the gorgeous cover up for it now. It was awarded the inaugural Acheven Book Prize for young adult fiction. So that was a prize with a cash prize, but it also meant you got published by Regal House Books, which is a New York publisher this year. And The Little House on Everywhere Street, it tells a story of a family living in an unusual house where they can step out into London, New York, or Paris through different doors. It's brilliant, really, really good fun. Malcolm's been writing for a number of years. He's studied English at Sunderland and Minnesota in the US. He's written short stories that have appeared in places like the London Magazine. And we discuss all sorts of stuff, including finding your voice by writing like other people, the due diligence you should do when approached by a publisher, and why the best place for coming up ideas might be when you're standing around and bored. And just one thing, apologies for some of the rumbly microphone. This was another in-person interview, and I had to I've forgotten how to use my mic, so there's some rumbly. It doesn't last long, but apologies in advance for that. But yes. Brilliant.
Well, let's jump in and listen to Mark chatting with the lovely FMA Dixon.
FMA Dixon, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today, sir?
Excellent, thank you, Mark. Very pleased to be here.
Oh, it's an honour, and an in-person interview as well, which is becoming a thing now. No more Zoom. Well, there will be a lot more Zoom, but anyway, have you fully recovered from our moment of fame at the Faversham Literary Festival a couple of weeks ago?
I really enjoyed that
good,
entire experience.
It was really good.
It was the audience were very receptive. There was lots of questions. There was a good vibe in the room. I kind of missed it. So since then, I haven't recovered. I've become since my book came out, The Little House on Everywhere Street. Becoming a bit of an attention-seeking monster from being a quiet man who goes to work each day for 20 years and comes home. It's now all about me.
Well, look, let's talk about your book. Tell us about The Little House on Everywhere Street. And if I remember rightly, it all started when you were stuck on a concourse at Gardenor.
Yeah, years ago. I mean, I've said this in a few contexts. As a family, we've been very lucky. We've always been able to take nice holidays. And in general, we had friends who live in New York, so we could go there quite a bit. Paris was easy to get to, and London's just a short train ride away. And one night coming back from Paris, our train didn't go. It was late at night. The kids were little. And we just thought, being there's great. Getting there's pain.
Yeah.
And began to talk about, what if you lived in a house where if you went out the front door, you'd be in New York. At the side door, you'd be in Paris. And in the back door, you'd be in London. Mm-hmm. So we talk about that and we said, wouldn't that be great? That'd be lovely. So I began to think about, what would the house be like? Who would live there? How would living in such a house affect them? And what could go wrong? And it turns out, when you think about what could go wrong, the answer is quite a lot.
Quite a lot. Yeah. And it all happens in the book. It is absolutely charming. It's such a delightful book, and it has a family in it that reminds me of those great children's literary families, like the Browns in Paddington or the Baudelaires in a series of unusual events and stuff like that. So where did this, because you talk about, you're sort of brainstorming it with your family, where did the family in the book come from? Because I can see some similarities.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, the father of the family, Mr. Redmayne, is a bit of a well-meaning bumbler. And that could be me. Mrs. Redmayne, for the record, is not my wife. They just happen to share a number of small foibles, which Mrs. Redmayne, they have a shared love of stationery, for example, which isn't character defining, but it just happens to be one of those things that they have in common.
Yeah.
And the children, I had to have 3 children because each children had to go to school in a different city to bring those into play. Two boys and a daughter. The daughter is not based on either of my own 2 daughters, but one's really good at art, like she is, and one's really good at music, like she is. So it isn't so much the personalities of the characters, but some of the foibles get grafted on. Yeah, in a sense.
I mean, we were talking about this before we started recording, about the idea that, when you have any kind of, if you meet someone, if you hear someone's story, if you hear, it starts to leak into your books, doesn't it? You can't help it as a writer, can you?
I mean, yeah, I always tell people who know me, don't tell me stuff because I will use it. No matter how personal. At some point, if I think it's good, it's going in. And I say, I used to teach a writing class years ago in Harrow, and there was a woman there who told me something about herself, and I thought, I'm going to use that. I know it. And sure enough, I did. She said something about, it was quite a touching thing, really. She said, when you get to a certain age, everyone you used to know has died. And I thought, what a great line. And so I had a character, happened to be quite old. It was one of the things that she said.
Right.
So that's it, folks. Never tell me anything.
I'll have my lawyers on standby. But you've been writing for quite some time, haven't you? And it's mostly been short stories up to now. So where did it all start for you?
I mean, there's kind of a family background. I mean, I had a grandmother who was told stories. I've always been interested in reading and books, even as a small child. So being a writer was always what I wanted to be. And everything I've tried to do is been trying to facilitate to that end. I've did a degree in English. I did another degree in English and a master's degree in the States. So reading and writing has always been my main talents. And it's taken me a long time to have a book published. I did see myself primarily for a long, long time as a short story writer. And I did write and publish a lot of short stories. But getting a collection together professionally always seemed to be a step too hard to bring about. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, and while I was doing that, I was developing my own writing style or styles, mm-hmm. and the voice that I wanted to develop. And it took a long while to sound like me. Mm. The different parts of me. I was quite literate to begin with, but there's a comic side that wasn't apparent in the writing. It took a long time for that to appear, and so that was good. It was all really gearing up towards writing something like the Little House, which is well written but also entertaining and funny. Yeah. At the same time.
Yeah. The voice thing, that really rings true for me, because I struggled for years to find my own voice. And I did that thing of, for years, I'm trying to be like the writers I admire. It's like trying on their shoes for a bit, and they don't quite fit, and they're a bit tight, and you get a few bunions or whatever. And then through that, you have to put them to one side and discover your own voice, don't you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I started off trying to write like James Joyce. Exactly, but not the really but there's kind of the short stories of Dublin and say, and other Irish writers, William Trevor, and his short stories are so well made that it's hard. They're so quietly well made that you can't see the joins.
Yes,
he was such a great craftsman, and I did have some success writing in that kind of style. I did have a very good short story published in the London magazine, but it still wasn't entirely me. And so what happened was my youngest daughter, when she was 8, was obsessed with 3 volumes of stories by Louis Sakar, the Wayside Stories. Right. And there are 3 volumes, each with 30 stories in, short stories about a group of children that go to a particular school, Wayside School, and they have strange logic, very funny, strange adventures. And so we had 3 of those at bedtime every night. And we get to the end, then we'd start again. And she would say, "Oh, there's only 3 of these." So we decided to make her a 4th one.
Wow.
And so I wrote the 30 stories. My wife did the illustrations, and we put together and had it printed up and gave it to her at Christmas. And she was delighted. She became a character in the book. Wow. With all the wacky children. We had wacky adventures too. And so, and that was such a success that my wife said, "This is what you should do." Yeah. So that became a clue as to try and relax a bit. And the Little House wasn't my first attempt to do that. It was the second one. But I say it takes a long time to find your own way. But once I wrote the first page of Little House, I knew that I'd found it.
Oh, that's amazing. Because what you're doing there, you've identified an audience, which is your daughter, and you've got that validation from your wife. So often it takes someone just to tap you on the shoulder and say, "You can do this." And as you talk about that first page about finding that voice and getting into that was, as you say, you've been trying to write like Joyce, you've been trying to write like other authors. Was it nice to have to sort of shrug that off and just be yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably. I mean, I wrote that page and a half in a single go. It's not a huge amount of words, like 600 words perhaps, but the style was fully formed, and it expressed really everything about the book. It expressed the style it was going to be written in, the sense of irony that the characters are bathed in, the comedy. I hadn't pre-planned it. It was in there. Once I started to write that page, it all came out. And from there, it was like the seed from which the rest of the book grew.
And it has, folks, do check the book out because it has such a lovely, relaxed style. It's completely charming. It's one of these books that it's so nice to be in this world with these people. Very often when something looks easy and it's easy to read, it can be quite a struggle to get it right. Having found that voice, was it difficult to continue and finish the book?
I didn't find that, no. I mean, I found when I tried to write a sequel that it was hard to get going, and it took a long time. And I realized I wasn't getting back into the same voice.
Right.
And it sounds simple, but I was trying to write it in a more action style. I was trying to have a bit of a departure,
right,
and I just couldn't get that going at all. And then I was waiting in with my younger daughter in a mile-long queue for a Dumbo ride at Euro Paris. And it wasn't moving. And I had these ideas in my head, and I virtually wrote the first page in my head, just thinking about, or at least the first paragraph.
Standing in the line at Disney.
Standing in the line at Disney, yeah. While my daughter was bored, and I was thinking, it's taking a long time, this, isn't it? But it's the same voice.
Well,
and so, the second book starts to assimilate to the first one. So once that voice came back again, everything came back again.
Right.
So
that's brilliant. This book is an award winner as well. Tell us about that. That helped get it published, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually forgotten that identity. I mean, I do scour various websites, etc., for opportunities. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I must have spotted this particular prize being offered for a novel. The novel was complete. I was looking for something to do with it, and so I entered it, and then I forgot all about it. Mm. And it was months and months later that they got in touch and said, "You've won. We're not going to announce it yet, but is it still free? Can we still use it?" And so yeah, great. I mean, it came with a not a huge cash prize. The fact that it was going to be published, etc., kind of changed everything, really.
Yeah.
And they did some publicity on their website and kind of changed my mentality a little bit. I was a little bit struggling to, one day this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's made a huge difference.
What was that moment like? How did it? Was it an email? Was it a call?
It was an email, and I was very cautious because and I've been shortlisted for prizes before, and hadn't won. And I had a disappointment not long before that. I had a short story that was shortlisted for the Creative Writers Award, and I felt certain that was going to do well. And then in the end, it wasn't in the top 3, and I thought that was impossible. What's wrong with those people? So I was a little bit cautious when this came in, and then I did the company's based in the States, so I didn't know them. So my wife and I did some due diligence. We checked them out, were they bona fide? Did they get books into bookshops? Yeah. And so I was cautious. I didn't leap around the room thinking, "Hey, I've made it." I thought, okay, I'll check that out.
The cautious thing, we've heard this a few times before. People can't quite believe that it's real, and they're always kind of, it's that thing of, the thing I've always wanted is finally here. Is it really the thing I've always wanted? Did you have a bit of that? I just wanted to make sure I believed in the novel, even though I was probably only one of 2 people in the world who'd actually read it and did. So I believed it was good enough. I didn't want to waste it. I didn't want to give it to a company that weren't straight up. Yeah.
So that's why I was cautious. I wanted it to be real. Mm. It's a bit like VAR. your team scores a goal, but is it really a goal? And you can't celebrate until you get the,
Yeah, we could spend a long time talking about the changes that VAR has made to football. The other thing that's happened is since Faversham as well, we were talking before recording, you've basically become a children's entertainer now. So tell us about your recent event on World Book Day.
Yeah, that was great. I was invited to go to St. Mary's School in Whitstable to read to and interact with years 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And so I went along on World Book Day and I had 2 half-hour sessions, which I was over prepared for just in case.
Yes.
In case the response was 0. And it was really, really nice. It was very fun. The years 3 and 4 came in. They're all dressed up in different outfits. Was a pupil there dressed as one of my characters?
Now, this is, we said this on the podcast a few weeks ago. We were talking about if someone cosplays as a character from one of your books, you've made it. You've arrived. It's better than the film adaptation. It's better than anything else. Is someone dressed? So tell us about this.
It's just the sweetest thing I've ever seen. I mean, the character in my novel goes to school in France and has a French school uniform. Felice, the daughter of the family, and this little girl had on a blue beret with a red bubble that she has and the blue outfit, and she came in and at some point during the session she asked a question, her hand was very straight up, and the teacher said, "Have you seen what she's wearing?" I said, "I know, it's the best thing I've ever seen." But it went really well. I mean, I found my level really. But the book is aimed at readers of all ages, yes. People who like to read. And so I said to them, I'm dressed as one of the great advantages of being an author on World Book Day. You get to dress as yourself. And my outfit, this is me in my FMA Dixon outfit. It's very authentic. And so I explained to them I'm going to read to them for 4 minutes. Right. Held for the 4 fingers. So there's no excuse for any of them to fall asleep. Although I did read to my 2 daughters when they were their age every night at bedtime. They always fell asleep. Which is very rude. And sometimes I would fall asleep. And so if they saw me doing that, they should let me know. And that only took up 5 minutes, and then there was another 25 minutes. But it went in a second because they all had questions. Hands went up everywhere. Right. They could say, Wally at the back, Army guy, West Ham fan, Felice. And the hands are up. And they asked really interesting questions. There was, do I write with a pen?
Right. And
how do I get those words into a book?
See, these are questions I should have asked, Frank. Yeah. Do you write with a pen?
No.
Oh.
No. My handwriting has deteriorated to almost scribble over the years.
And how do you get all those words into a book?
I typed them up and got very lucky to get somebody else to put into a book.
Right.
However, they get to keep all the money.
Did you get the question? Because I got this. I did a few school events, and it might be because I did a film, because they immediately put their hand up and say, "Are you rich?" Did you get that one?
No, the older group came in. The first question was from a boy who was quite close to the front. How'd you make any money out of this?
And your answer was, "Can you tell me?"
Yeah, get 12%. And then I did some on the spot maths, which was wrong in front of the school. It's 12%. You got £12. That means you get £1. I thought that isn't right, is it? Teachers, help me. But they asked lots of interesting questions. And it's just like hands up all the time. It just went in seconds. And then the teacher was saying, "We have one more question."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's great. How did you get the gig? How did the school hear of you? Because I know we've got a lot of authors listening who try and get school gigs.
Actually, it was no help to anyone. It was through a friend. Right. A friend knew that they were looking for somebody, and she knew me. And so she made the connect.
Well, that's fair. Having friends is always good preparation for the life. And you said you over-prepared, and obviously, you had a great audience asking lots of questions, but what else did you have in the bag just in case there was complete silence when they didn't ask any questions?
I mean, I plan to read some more. if
Until they fell asleep.
If I brought up enough the first time we had no questions, I could do that again, and suddenly be half an hour would be up. I did teach a writing class, an evening class in Harrow, in the last century, he said, for 5 years, which was a great experience. Stephen Diaz was a part of that.
Oh, fancy for Stephen Diaz, mutual friend of ours.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And so I had a 20-week course, so I had lots of writing tips and hints and things you could do to make a character and what do characters want. And so I had a kind of mini English lesson ready if it was silent to say, what is a character? What do characters want? Well, there you got your story. If they can't get that thing. Yeah. So, but I didn't have to do any of that. I just had to answer their lovely questions.
Fantastic. So what's coming next for you, Malcolm? You mentioned a sequel. Will there be more books?
I have written the sequel. I've written the sequel and the sequel to the sequel.
Nice.
But the sequel is done, to my mind. I've written it and I've edited it line by line 4 times. And now I'm hoping for interest, which is never very positive. Is no guarantee of actual interest. I mean, I'm hoping that the current book will sell enough that the publisher will be interested, or if not that publisher, then at least some other one. Yeah. And it seems to be selling. I've been getting lots of feedback mostly from people who know me, but from ages 8 to 80, everyone I've come across has really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So, just like I always said they would.
Well, folks, look, The Little House on Everywhere Street is completely charming. I adored it. It does have a great ending that sort of opens the door to more adventures and different kinds of adventures, which is really, it's not just going to be the same thing again, which is great. So do grab a copy. Malcolm, it's been an absolute joy speaking to you. I hope to speak to you again real soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That was absolutely brilliant. And do you know what? There was such an important moment in that interview, Mark. And that moment was writing that story, the 4th story, the unwritten story for his daughter, wasn't it? I just couldn't believe how brilliant that was, because for me, I mean, anyone listening, any author, and I challenge any author to disagree with this, any author probably started their life thinking about, writing a book for their kids, right? Around, if you ever had children, it's always that kind of, you're really making up stories. I mean, we've kind of all been there as dads and mums. But the fact that he actually wrote the book, wrote it, because a lot of people think about doing that, but they never actually created it. I thought that's such an amazing story as to how a lot of his kind of career started as well, just doing something lovely for one of his children.
And it helped him find his voice as a writer. You know, he'd been dabbling with trying to write like James Joyce, trying to write like this author, that author, and experiment. I love the idea that he experimented with short stories, because that is such a great economic way of doing it, of experimenting and trying different things. But when he was writing for his daughter, suddenly, not only did he discover who his readers are, he discovered his voice. And it's such a sweet story that, you know, it was just a question of being, you know, doing something, a wonderful gesture for someone you love, and getting that as a reward. I think that's that's really, really sweet. And it's something that carries across into the book. Actually, the book is such a sweet story, and they're such a lovely family. So yeah, I think that's, it became its own reward, which I love.
It's great. And he did say, and we've heard this a number of times, Joanne Harris was one of the first people to say it, but it took a long time for Malcolm to find his voice. And you referenced as well, this idea of, I like that, what you referenced actually about how you said, you were trying to write like your favorite authors. And I think that's a very, very common thing that we all fall into. Yeah. But in some ways, because he was writing and he knew what we call the avatar, that he knew who his reader was. And when it's a child as well that so intimately, in some ways it gives you a massive advantage, doesn't it? Because you're not kind of having to second guess all of the things about who this, a lot of people say you make up this avatar, you give them a name and you give them an age and you say, what are they into? What do they like to listen to on, what radio stations, what TV shows? And you have to kind of like imagine this avatar. But when you actually are writing it for a real person that represents that group of people you're writing for, I think it's even more powerful because you speak directly to them. You speak to them. And I've often thought about that. I've often thought about wanting to write a book for my kids about, life. But I was thinking it's easier to do it to them, write it to them almost like as a love letter from a dad, rather than trying to write the big non-fiction bestseller to whoever, it makes it more personal and it creates more of a, intimacy.
When we try and please everyone, we more often than not end up pleasing no one. And I think the thing we get scared of sometimes are those little specific details that we think only we think about and only we relate to, or maybe the person we're writing to relates to. So if you're writing something for your daughter, there might be a little joke there or something that's happened in their life that you refer to that that they'll get. But what you will discover is that that will resonate with so many other people and surprise them and delight them and move them. So those kind of specifics, that's how you find your voice. That only you could have said it that way. Only you could have shown us that perspective. And that's what agents are looking for. It's what publishers are looking for. It's what readers are looking for, is the voice, that unique voice. But just to dial back to that thing of writing like your favorite authors, I don't think it's a bad thing. I did it for years, and it helped me get the craft together. It helped me learn the craft. It helped me learn, and it just gets you writing. And it's not you, and it's not your voice. But the more and more you write, the more likely you are to develop that voice and absolutely become who you are. Because some people get it straight away, but some people it takes years.
The analogy that I can draw that a lot of people probably get as well if they've ever played the guitar, and I know you do like a bit of guitar, Mr. Stay. It's a bit like when you start out playing the guitar, you don't typically come up with your own songs straight away. You typically kind of learn other people's songs, and then they evolve to cover versions, which are versions of that song, but in your own style. So they're still inspired by the original song. But what I found is the more that you practice playing other people's songs, that you actually discover your voice within that, and then it comes out, and then it's unique. So it's like every single writer, every single musician, every single creative is inspired by someone else. And we've seen it just today, Ed Sheeran, I don't know if you read on the news, but Ed Sheeran's court case where they're saying, you copied our music. Yeah. That's been thrown out. Thank God, because, without going off on a big tangent on this one, there's been this real litigious, which is the best-selling single of last year? Right. Let's find a song that has the same chords, and then we'll take them to court and see how much money we can scrap. And absolutely horrible practice. And so I'm very happy about where
there's a hit, there's a writ.
Exactly. That is exactly right. Exactly right. But Ed Sheeran openly says, I'm inspired by other people. He's even paid some of royalties for tracks where he did write something that was inspired by a track. And we're all inspired. We wouldn't be writers if we weren't inspired by the books we'd read. It's what actually, I think we wouldn't be writers if we'd never read a book before, right? I mean, it happens through, we're all part of that big paying it forward. Yeah.
But you take those. There is a band that goes around and just plays every song you've ever heard with the same sort of three chords, doing the three chord trick.
I'd seen them.
but that's why developing a voice is so important, because, you know, you give Ed Sheeran, you say to him, okay, write a song with these chords and a melody along these lines, and he'll go off and make his song in his own voice. You give it to, you know, a punk rocker, they will do it in their voice. You give it to someone who does hip hop, they'll do it in their voice. You'll get 3 very different songs. Yes, they will. But I mean, it's slightly different in music because there's only so many notes, only so many combinations and scales, or, you know. Whereas with words, we have that kind of there's you know, the variety is that much more varied. But
yeah.
But yeah, this is why it's important to develop a voice, because it's not about the shape. You can tell a crime thriller where a body is discovered in chapter 1, there's a twist in the middle, and at the end, someone is arrested. We could ask every one of our listeners to write that story. That's a familiar story, but they will, if they bring themselves to it, if they bring their voice to it, every listener will produce a completely different book. It'll have that structure. Yeah. Like a chord structure, like 12-bar blues, you know. Yeah. It'll have that structure, but if they bring their voice to it, it'll be completely different. And that's why it's so important to develop it.
And the big thing about finding and discovering your voice, it's a very important moment in an author's career and development, because firstly, you can let go of the struggle. Right, because there's a big part of it, like not feeling authentic, not feeling like it's really you. So you move beyond that, and you can focus more on enjoying the writing instead of questioning: is this the right way to? You know, is this really representative of me? But it also, I think, shows an evolution in a writer's journey. I think it's a bit of a rite of passage to discover your voice. I think there's very few people that genuinely can say, "Yeah, out the gate, I found my voice," because even before that moment, you know, how long had they been writing English essays at school all their life? You know, it's all part of the development of that process. So for everyone who's done it, congratulations. And for everyone who's still discovering their voice, congratulations for being on the journey, because I think it is, you know, and you just never quite know when that moment comes where you think, yeah, I think a lot of it's psychological, actually, a bit like how Malcolm talked about how the competition win changed his mentality. Yeah, I think there's a point where we get I think we maybe discover our voice when our confidence grows to a certain point. I think it's linked.
Yeah, it's an putting yourself out there with your own voice. It's an exposing act. It's saying, this is who I really am. So the thing is, those 1 and 2 star reviews will hurt all the more when you get them. Right. But also the thing is, I don't think, you know, as you develop and change as a person, your voice will change and develop as well. You will find different and new. Yeah, I'm a different person to the person I was 10 years ago. I like to think I'm definitely older and maybe a little bit wiser. I don't know. But you know, you like to think that you change and develop as a person. So it's a never-ending journey, struggle, whatever, you know.
Well, I don't think we get to a point where it's like, I found my voice, like it's in a box and you unwrap it and go, here it is. I think you get to a point where this finding a voice means you've reached a point where you feel like you're in your own skin. You feel confident enough to express yourself authentically without feeling like you're an imposter, like classic imposter syndrome. A lot of early writers have this idea of or, you know, who am I to try and write a book when, you know, I read some of these classic works of my favorite authors, and who am I to even attempt to even be in the same industry world as these people? So, I
mean, I grew up loving Douglas Adams and Stephen Fry, and, you know, I thought, oh, that's how you have to write. But those are very, very clever men, well educated, you know, whereas I'm sort of, you know, still learning the basics, it feels like sometimes. And, you know,
I feel like that, Mark, to be honest.
And, you know, I didn't go to university. So, you know, it's you know, it just felt pretentious when I tried to write like them. So it wasn't, it was fun trying, but it wasn't me.
Yeah. But you had to do that to test your voice against, exactly. So that's the other thing. It's like, absolutely go for it. Like, find your voice. In other words, feel like you're no longer an imposter, or you're no longer trying to mimic someone else. Get to the point of your confidence where you're like feeling like you're the authentic author that you want to be, and then your voice evolves and develops beyond that. I mean, and then it just becomes richer and richer, if you like, over time. But for me, the biggest thing is as a reader, the way that I know that I found an author I love is that I hear their voice all the way through all their books they write, regardless of what they're writing. It's like that's the thing that's why you always just pick something off the shelf. You wouldn't even read the back cover if you know you've read 4 or 5 of their books and you love them. It's like, you don't even have to think about it. You just think this will be a great book, or I'll enjoy it because of the style of which they write, the voice that comes through. So that's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. And it's again, you hear people say they read one book and it's like, oh, I found my favorite author, and they keep coming back for more.
Yeah, it's not my favorite book, it's my favorite author, isn't it? Well, it is favorite book sometimes, but every author wants to be. That's a bit of a kind of, we talked about all these rights, these are kind of most amazing things that you could wish for as an author, whether it's cosplay, you mentioned it again in this interview. But, I think that's a big one. Wouldn't it be amazing to, like, one day as an author go, like, just be on a website somewhere reading, Goodreads or something, and you read the words, "Oh, Mark Stay is my favorite author." Like, how cool would that be? Not just like my favorite book. Have you had that?
I've had it a couple of times. Yeah, it's weird.
What did that feel like?
I was about to swear.
Surreal?
It's bloody brilliant.
I love it. Here's the thing. We haven't, you see, in the Academy, I've been developing, we've kind of been playing with this idea of milestones, something that we're launching quite soon, this idea. And we haven't actually got that in as a milestone. And I'm going to add it in when somebody, because that's a milestone in an author's career. When somebody says to you, "You're my favorite author," these intangible moments, it's not all about, I hit number 1 on the bestseller list. It's these moments where somebody says, "Your book changed my life. You're my favorite author." These are the bits where, these moments where you think, wow, I'm really making a difference here. And it's just like, this is really a worthwhile career because I'm changing people's lives. And that's exciting. When did that happen? Yeah. Was that like in some book signing or a fair?
It's you on social media. I've seen it and a couple of reviews. Nice. And and I'm reading it going, are you sure? Just Terry Pratchett for a start.
That's the thing, right? When you think about all your favourite authors, who would you say is your favourite author? Could you pick one? Is it Terry Pratchett?
I think if I only had to read one, it would be Terry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, there you go. Write in and let us know, folks, if you've ever had that experience. Someone's told you that they're your favourite author. Tell us about when it happened and how it made you feel. We'd love to hear your stories, and we'll read them out on the show. Brilliant stuff. Now, the other thing I just wanted to mention as well, which I thought was very amusing, was this idea that as an author, friends of authors have to be very careful, especially when they're with you at parties. They say things that they shouldn't be saying. They tell you stories about it. It's a very common thing, isn't it, for authors to be? Our radars are always open to. Oh, that'd make a good character. That'd make a good plot point.
We're magpies. We are constantly stealing bits from other people's lives. And the thing is, because you dress it up in a different setting, a different time, and it comes through your voice, it all sounds a bit different. But it's I remember when we spoke to Erica James the first time, she said her sons were so embarrassed because she would be earwigging people's conversations on holiday and sort of writing notes and then going over and talking to these people. But you have to have that curiosity switched on. But there's you always hear stuff you think, oh, well, that's good. When you hear a little nugget and you think, I'm going to try and put that in somewhere. That's
when you read it in a newspaper, it's fun, but you also think, everyone else might have seen this. But when you overhear a conversation, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like you kind of like you've totally like in on the inside. And I think something else I wanted to ask everyone out there as well, like, have you ever overheard a conversation and you've used it and it's backfired?
Did I tell you about these guys on the train a few weeks ago? Apologies if I'm repeating myself. No. But I was on the train to London, and there were these 3 fellas, and I think they were going fishing. They had all this equipment, and they were proper geezers, right? And they were talking about a friend of theirs. He said, "Had you heard about Fred?" I'm giving this away for free. I kind of think I might use this somewhere. But they were saying, he nearly died on the operating table, and you are half hearing this conversation. God, Fred nearly died on the operating table. And he said he had one of them out-of-body experiences, right? So you listen to these guys, you think, I could, if they're talking about football or they're talking about motor cars, I'd switch off. But then suddenly you've got these geezers, right, talking about he's having an out-of-body experience. And it's like, did he see, the light? Yeah, he saw the light and everything. And he goes towards the light. And you'll never guess who he saw there. His bloody ex-girlfriend. His ex-girlfriend. And she said to him, we're not ready for you here. Sod off. And then he woke up. And I swear to God, that's the conversation I heard on the train. I'm like, thank you, writing gods, for this manna from heaven. That's going in a book somewhere.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I haven't found a place for it yet, but I just thought, this is fantastic. This is absolutely gold, Yeah.
There's some people out there in the world that just don't realize how brilliant they are, and they could be on stage like we were talking last week. I think, absolutely brilliant. So if you've ever overheard a conversation and you've used it in a book, tell us what the conversation was. It has to be completely bonkers. It has to be completely bonkers. But I'm also curious to hear from people who did that and then it backfired on them in some way, because I think there's going to be some stories that come from the stories. So pop over to Twitter, Facebook, come to our website, bestsellerexperiment.com, click on the contact us and tell us your stories. We want to hear your stories personally. Mark and I get all the emails that come through the contact form. Drop us a note. We're always fascinated to hear about what you've heard. Absolutely. It's a big old world out there. Excellent stuff, Mr. Stay. So, Mr. Stay, what's happening on social media this week?
Oh, lots of lovely good news. So on the Bestseller Academy, Osman Hanif dropped a line. He says, my debut, The Verdict, which is called Blasphemy in India, was shortlisted for the KLF Gets Farmer Prize for English Fiction. It's a big award for Pakistani authors, and some of the biggest Pakistan authors have won or been shortlisted for it in the past, including Camilla Shamsi, Mohsin Hamid, and Mohammed Hanif. Osman says, I didn't end up winning, but I'm still delighted with having been shortlisted. Osman, they can never take that away from you, man. That is fantastic
Absolutely
news.
Brilliant.
Absolutely
and talking about confidence building, I mean, if you want external validation, getting shortlisted for a major prize like that is rocket fuel, isn't it, to the author's jets? Absolutely brilliant.
Big badge of honor. That's a big tick on your CV.
And as I said to Osman in response to that, because he posted that up in the academy, and I said to him, and you're right, no one can ever take that away from you. You take that with the rest of your life as a kind of chink in your or like a badge of honor, like you said. But also it's that boost, it's that confident boost that it gives you when you sit down to write another book, having been shortlisted for a big award. You write with a newfound confidence, and I really do think that's how the bestseller kind of journey evolves. It's that confidence that builds and builds, compounding constantly, like interest in your bank account. So Osman, I mean, you're a shining light, and you keep on getting these opportunities. And I said to him in the academy, I said, this is more proof that you are on an incredible road to success. So just keep on doing what you do and keep working hard, and great things are going to come. Yes. Brilliant stuff.
And actually, speaking of Pakistani authors, Aves Khan, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, he's in London at the moment. We met up for the first time in real person, and we had a great day. I took him on a tour of Battersea and Battersea Park, and it was the coldest day I've known for a very, very long time. I nearly froze him to death on the banks of the Thames, but we had a really, really good day together. So it was great to catch up with Aves in person. So it was really good fun. Another fantastic bit of news, a long-time Patreon supporter, Ivan Wainwright. He won the Selfies Book Award for Adult Fiction at the London Book Fair this week. Now, the Selfies, they were set up a few years ago by Book Brunch. Book Brunch is one of the trade journals in the UK, and it was set up to recognise brilliant work done by highly professional self-published authors working in the UK, sponsored by Ingram Spark, and it's supported by the London Book Fair and Nielsen Books. So it's all about discovering new talent in self-publishing. And Ivan, who, I think he tweets us constantly supporting us on Patreon, couldn't have gone to a nicer guy. He won it for his novel, The Other Times of Caroline Tangent. And huge congrats to you, Ivan. It's such an amazing achievement.
Brilliant, Ivan. So pleased for you. And to get the recognition, I believe that his award was actually given out, was it, Mark, at the London Book Fair as well?
Yeah,
wow.
It's got a great picture of him looking very, very happy indeed. I'll put a link to the tweet in the show notes so you can check that out. Also, if you've enjoyed Back to Reality, I think you will really enjoy The Other Times of Caroline Tangent, because here's the shout line: if you could travel back in time to see any concert, who would you go and see? And it's about a couple who invent a time machine and they go back to Woodstock, to David Bowie as Ziggy Stardust, Edith Piaf in 1930s Paris. You know, they've got this great bucket list of gigs. And of course, drama ensues. But, man, I'm thinking of Pink Floyd doing Dark Side of the Moon at the Rainbow, Jimi Hendrix at the Isle of Wight Festival. Just this long list of gigs that I'd love to have gone to. Who would you have want to go back and see?
Well, I was actually very fortunate. I got to see one of the last ever Nirvana gigs in Montreal in Canada.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
In a very small venue. Almost got impaled by a guy in front of me with a leather jacket with big studs on it. When Smells Like Teen Spirit kicked off, I almost got, that was almost my days were done. Mosh pit ensued. So that was one I ticked off. What would I go and see again? Oh, it would probably be somebody that no longer performs. Maybe someone that's passed, that I've never seen. I've always wanted to see. Well, actually, we could do a whole series. You shouldn't get me started on this, Mark.
Sorry,
I could do
man.
a whole, but now I'm completely, because there's so many. I just I can't even think. I can't even. I'd love to see the last ever Crowded House gig, but that's probably going to be in the future, because Crowded House has always been a big inspiration.
Yeah.
But they're out and doing it again. But at some point, that amazing story is gonna come to a conclusion. I didn't go to a Prince gig, which I regret.
Prince is on my top of my list.
Oh, really? I actually had tickets and I couldn't make it.
Oh, no.
I know.
No,
I
love
missed
to see
out.
Prince.
I missed out when I was 9 years old. I had tickets that my dad agreed to come with me. My first ever gig. I might have told this story before, but I'll tell it again because it's funny. Royal Albert Hall, and it was in between Christmas and New Year. And my mum would always change the calendar. She'd have two calendars that, they overlap for a week. And on the 1980 calendar, I wrote it on the 27th. And then when I saw the new calendar, I wrote it down, but I got the date wrong. I put it on the 28th. By the week before, my mum had changed the calendars over, so 28th. My dad was coming home early from work to drive me up to London to go and see the band. And I got the tickets out that afternoon, 28th of December, and it said 27th of December. And I cried like I've never cried before. Little 8-year-old Mark. I was so heartbroken. Royal Albert Hall, first gig. And do you know who the band was, Mark?
1980. No, go on.
And this, I forever will live to regret this moment. It was Aha.
My Claire's a big fan of Aha. She's seen them play a number of times. They're a cracking live band.
Openly admit, all right, full on pop, but Aha were a huge influence in my youth. But here's the funny thing. My dad, when he came back from work to find out the bad news, did an incredible job of trying to look sad. Because he basically had been, this was like Dad of the Year, like Aha. He's into Beethoven, didn't even know who Aha was. And honestly, what the gig would have been is thousands of screaming teenage girls screaming at Morton Harker up on stage, and me and my dad on the side feeling a little bit awkward. So, yeah.
Well,
that's what I'd like to go back
Aha
and do.
connections. 1, Claire is a big fan. 2, when I was younger and much, much thinner, I had a striking resemblance to Paul Wakhtar in the band, or Paul Wakhtar Savoy as he's known now. And also, when I used to work for a hi-fi shop in Dorking, their manager lived in Box Hill, and I installed a TV for their manager because I went to his house and he had all these platinum records on the wall for Aha.
How random.
Yeah.
How very random. God, we're full of stories, aren't we? But
We're
for anyone
full
who
of
doesn't
something.
for anyone listening to the show going, who the bloody hell are Aha? Go on to Spotify or your listener of choice and go check out some of their top hits. They're absolutely brilliant. But so that's the one I would go back to and see. But this time I'd make sure I check the tickets at least 2 days before the gig.
Yeah. Now, Prince, I'd love to see Prince in his heyday. Apparently, he used to do a thing called the funky bonus. So they'd be in the middle of a tour, and when a band is playing the same stuff and they get a bit stuck in a rut, he would say, right, $1,000 bonus to whoever I deem to be the most funky tonight. And they all try to out-funk each other. And those were usually the best shows because everyone was really, I've got to get that $1,000 bonus. I'd like to have seen Queen. I never saw Queen in there.
You're right. Actually, I got to the Queen tribute concert in Wembley. That was pretty amazing. Just after Freddie Mercury died.
Really?
I was at Wembley
that was
for
great.
That was
a great gig.
bonkers. Yeah, that was amazing. But I'd love to have seen. I was so sad when Freddie Mercury passed away. It really affected me.
Yeah,
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, again, let's not digress.
Let's do a special
Ivan,
where we
let's get back to Ivan. Ivan,
Yes,
congratulations, man.
Well done.
Yes, I'll put a link to that so you can check that out. And just finally, I had a lovely note from MS Clements on Twitter, and it's at MS Clements Book. Having listened to more recent episodes, I've decided to go back to the beginning, 2 episodes a day while trying to recover the garden from weed invasion. Particularly keen to hear more indies and get tips for this indie litfic writer. Now, if you go, we have every time I put a link to the show on Twitter, I use Linktree. So when you click on that, you get a list of choices. You can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever. But at the top, I've put a link to the first ever episode. So if you do ever want to, because we're going to hit 400 episodes this year, so it's becoming more and more difficult to find episode number 1. So hopefully that will make life a little easier for you. And yes, 2 episodes a day. I think that's the most that anyone can have on prescription. Any more than that is deemed dangerous.
Yes, absolutely dangerous. And for anyone that would like to delve into the archives on the Academy, we've actually got this incredible system where you can search on any keyword that we've ever spoken about, and it brings up the actual clip, whether it's 1 minute or 10 minutes on that topic. So that's one of the benefits of being in the Academy, is you get access to this incredible technology that
I use it all the time.
Yeah, it's so useful. So if you're a scholar of the podcast, or there's times when you actually want to, you just want to dive in because there's something you need specifically. 400 episodes, it's almost impossible. I mean, even Mark, you're probably the encyclopedia of the podcast. Like, you kind of can almost recall the episode number, but for most mere mortals, that it's like
actually
needle in a haystack.
The person who knows the podcast better than anyone else, I suspect, is Sage Gordon Davis, who's been listening to us since the beginning, and Sage has listened to every episode at least 3 times, I think. Yeah. So Sage is my touch
Sage
point
would be Sage would be that. That would be her topic on Mastermind, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent stuff. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening with us today. Thank you for going with us on our I see ourselves, Mark, as we age, sitting out on the porch in our rocking chairs, talking about all things. Thank you for entertaining that and letting us kind of delve down the nostalgia roads. And send us your stories as well, folks, because we do like to talk about what you're up to. We like to talk about your stories and experiences, and we do read every email that comes through. We can't promise to respond to every single one of them, but we always try to. So please do drop us a message. Go to bestsellerexperiment.com and click on the contact button and fill out that little form. And if you'd like to actually get, if you'd like to get the weekly updates about what our latest podcast is, what you can learn from it, we are sending out podcast every pretty much Wednesday now, where we will announce what's coming out, and all the links that you need. So come and join the mailing list at the website as well. You can do that by clicking on the mailing list tab.
Sure. And don't forget to subscribe, give us a rating, give us a review if you want, wherever you get your podcasts. That all makes us more visible. Tell your friends, share us with your writers groups on Facebook and in the real world. We're on Bestseller Experiment on Facebook, and Twitter and Instagram. We are at BestsellerXP.
Brilliant stuff. And just closing up the How I Write that Mark's doing at the London Book Fair, the thing that's happening this week, if you are still working on that, then check out the 200wordchallenge.com. It's how a lot of people write now, and it really is working for them. So join us on that free challenge. Just go to 200wordchallenge.com, sign up and get writing, get that accountability and get that lifetime habit working. So brilliant. All right, Mark, listen, have a great time at the London Book Fair. Can't wait to hear how that goes next week. And I look forward to hearing all the amazing stories of everyone out there listening to the podcast as well. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. And it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. Goodbye.
Goodbye.